Pleasure to be here this afternoon. My name is Kevin Fudge. I'm the Director of Advocacy at American Student Assistance. I individually operate at the intersection of K-12, higher education, and workforce development. My organization is a national nonprofit that is thoroughly invested in helping young people identify their skills, talents, and abilities, and how that translates into a career path. We really want to make all young people understand what kind of careers are available to them, how those pathways work, and we support educators and educational apparatuses and institutions in implementing that work. With me today are three excellent individuals who do that work in their own individual contexts. They're going to talk about themselves individually, about their work, and we're going to talk about how we can support educators in this role. Spoiler alert, we're not asking educators to do something additionally to what they already do, because we all recognize that educators have a lot on their plates, but how to incorporate this work into their already existing practice. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you, JD LaRock of the National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship. JD.
Thanks a lot, Kevin, and thanks so much to American Student Assistance for bringing together this important panel, and really honored to be here with my colleagues as well. NIFTE, the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, is a global nonprofit that works in 25 states in the US and 18 countries around the world to provide high-quality entrepreneurship education. And when I think about the challenges of these past 2.5 years, our common collective challenge of educating learners through COVID, I think of the story of a teacher of ours in Brighton High School in the Boston area, Daniela Ariano. Imagine this, new teacher, new to the school, in the middle of COVID, and asked to teach a new course, in our case, entrepreneurship education for the first time. How do you do it? Well, it requires a lot of support. As they say, teamwork makes the dream work. And so what it required in her case was not only her own agency to do all she could as a new teacher in a very novel situation, but the robust support of our organization, her school, and corporate volunteers and community volunteers who buttressed her in that role. An aspect of our model is that we provide corporate and community volunteers who go into classrooms to support young learners as they begin to learn how to become entrepreneurs and build business plans to create actual businesses. In Daniela's case, we provided 60 volunteers, 60 people, virtually and eventually in person when things started to open up, to provide the support she needed coming in as a new teacher during such a difficult time. That's just one example of our obligation to educators at a time like this, and how we can you really learn from and utilize this moment to find out what works and to support them now that we're beginning to come out of COVID.
Excellent. Yeah, and that provides a really great segue to Adrienne. I know that you can describe your organization with regards to adults mentoring and the importance of providing them resources on how to provide those connections with students that are so important, particularly in an out-of-school time context. So, Adrienne.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Adrienne Porter. I have the honor of serving as Director of Educator Development at Citizen Schools, which is headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts, but we serve a variety of educators across the nation. And before I start, I really want to found in what Citizen Schools actually believes in, which is equity begins with opportunity. If you have no access to the resources, the tools, the possibilities, or the understanding of what's afforded to you, there will never, ever, ever be an equitable playing field for all students and all educators alike. So what we do at Citizen Schools essentially is to tackle that opportunity gap and ensure that all students and all educators are getting what they need and what they deserve. But particularly and specifically in the Catalyst program, our work actually rests on 3 pillars. The first pillar being teacher support, teacher development, and teacher education and efficacy, and making sure that we are girding and supporting our teachers in that respect. That is really the heart and the nucleus of what we do. And it is also to just bring like-minded educators like yourselves here today to explore experiential learning design and development in their classrooms and being able to execute projects in that trajectory and in that pedagogy. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is actually providing the tools to the educators in order to implement it. It's like, okay, I'm here, I want to do it, but how do I do it? We actually provide those tools and curricular resources for our educators in order to execute that in their classrooms. And then the third pillar, which I think is kind of our secret sauce, if you will, at Citizen Schools, and particularly in Catalyst, is we provide the career professionals who come into the classroom who actually want to provide not only context to their careers, but also just have a passion for middle school age children, right? And the human being behind the sixth grader. And they come into our classroom and they bring that career readiness and career ideas and ideologies into the classroom to provide context for the students. Why am I learning about climate science? Well, here's how I execute some of the skills that you're actually using in the classroom in my everyday life. And I think that that's the key element to what we do. We've had many successes and we've had many failures or areas of improvement. But I think one of the key things that I've seen as the success is the mind shift that happens with our educators. And I think that's really the first step, is shifting the minds of traditional education and academic pedagogy into something more hands-on for students, more tactical for students, and it allows the ownership of teaching to actually fall into the students' laps. So when we see that click and that connect for educators saying, hey, I was a little apprehensive coming into this program of like, I didn't know what to expect, but this 10-week intensive has opened my minds and opened my heart to something that can go beyond what I'm used to teaching. And it really affects and mirrors, and you can see it in our students as well, that they get that grasp of, I can do this and I can learn in a different way, in a new way, in an innovative way. So that's just a little bit about the Citizen Schools Catalyst program and the work that I'm so honored to do every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. In relating that story, it makes me think of like the history of the relationship between student and teacher, and maybe how it might have been adversarial. Like the teacher says this, the student accepts it as law, right? And this idea of, well, why do we have to learn this? It was met with fierce resistance. Well, because that's what the curriculum says, or because I said so. And those of you that are adults that have kids find yourself saying the same thing your parents did and cringing at that thought. It's now, the idea of relevance is now resonating a bit more, and it's like, yeah, well, how do we make things relevant to students? How do we help them understand that, yes, here's what you're learning, and here's how it translates to either your pathway going forward, whatever education you may do beyond high school, and how is it connected to what you may want to do later on in life? Not that it's one particular track, but how are you developing skills, and how do they transfer to different pathways in the future? That reminds me, we did some research that kind of showed that connection and the relevance, in that educators, over 2/3 said, you know what, this career-connected learning and education is very important, but less than a quarter knew how to actually do it. So that begins the question, like, how do you connect the dots? How do we take excited educators that want to incorporate this, and how do we show them the way? So Stephanie, can you tell us a little about the organization you represent, and then what a playbook might look like to be able to implement this?
Yeah, so I'm Stephanie Simpson. I'm the CEO at the Association for Middle Level Education, and we are the world's largest organization dedicated to that specific age group, 10 to 15-year-olds. So we represent principals, teachers, counselors, everyone who works with that age group. And we've been around for about 50 years, so we've been doing this work since before it was called middle school and it was still called junior high. So we've been thinking a lot during that time about what professional development looks like, and we had the opportunity actually during the pandemic to revise our best practice statement about middle school, and we talk a lot about professional development needing to be long-term, job-embedded, and relevant. And so when we think about career exploration or about exploration in general in the middle grades, it's not just another thing. It's not, adding to the initiative fatigue, because really in middle school, the entire curriculum should be one of exploration. So we saw a great opportunity to partner with ASA to create a playbook about how you create that curriculum of exploration. And what I think is most important about it is that it has roles for everyone in the school community: principals, counselors, teachers, community members, business partners, families. So it was really important to us that that professional development encompassed the whole school community, and that we provided resources so that each of those stakeholders knew their role and how to support that work at the school.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the all hands on deck idea, because a lot of times you'll hear, colleges will say, well, schools aren't doing enough to prepare students for us to succeed in college. And then the workforce will say, well, colleges aren't doing well enough to prepare students for the workforce. And it's not, this is not one step like a baton race, and then like the person didn't do their job and you're just standing there waiting for the baton to be passed to you. This is an all hands on deck. Everybody is engaged in this work. JD, can you talk a little bit about some of the things that, from a content perspective, what do you do to keep your content relevant, and how do you then build that out and can you talk a little about scale as well? So how are you bringing this effort to different jurisdictions, and then how are you ensuring that the content that you're providing is remaining relevant with how we're evolving as a society?
One of the interesting things about working in our field and trying to be thoughtful about career-connected education is recognizing how quickly the world is moving and how fast sectors and industries are advancing. I'll give you a great example. For years, NIFTY has had a program called Startup Tech. It's a particular program we have where we educate middle schoolers primarily in coding, and the purpose is to inspire them to build businesses that are app-based businesses. Lately, we've been having conversations about AI and virtual reality, and these new technologies that are very quickly coming into the fore are being utilized in industry and in education to some degree already, and scrutinizing our legacy programs to ask whether, MIT App Inventor as a curricular core of our program is enough. I mean, it's good, it's wonderful, but where do we need to go next? This is particularly acute when you consider the population of interest that many of us work with, middle schoolers. We have to think ahead. We have to go where the puck is going, because by the time they enter post-secondary education and the workforce, the things that we're foreseeing now will be really real in the real world then. And so it behooves all of us to have a forward-looking mentality when it comes to our curriculum. In terms of scale, one of the things that we do is we really try to intentionally stitch the educators we work with across the nation and around the world increasingly together, so that they can learn from each other, they can bolster each other, they can share things that are working in their classrooms, and they can really support each other. We're by far not we're far from the only organization that does this, but we empower teachers as master educators and lead teachers to have special roles beyond what they do in the classroom with their students, to really serve as teacher educators themselves and evangelists for the cause, but really specialists in a way that even we at the organization can't be, because they bring the authenticity of what they see in the classroom. So having a very intentional network of educators who serve as teacher educators is a simple idea, but vitally important.
Yeah, no, and intentional is the operative word for all this, purposeful. This isn't going to happen by osmosis. A lot of people, I think, we want all these advancements and changes to occur, but there needs to be an intentionality about it. So Adrienne, when you were talking about some of your challenges, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about some of those challenges and what you did to overcome them, and elaborate too on the concept of you can't be what you can't see. In my experience in working with community-based organizations, I had a very difficult time, particularly with middle school students, because it was like, I'm going to be an entertainer, I'm going to be an athlete, and nobody's going to tell me what other opportunities I can do, because that's how I'm going to build my future. And so how do you incorporate different ideas, different members of the community, to get buy-in about these different avenues and paths that might be available?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think Citizen Schools does really well is ensuring that we bring in our external partners. So those are the teachers, the administrators, our board, bringing those people into the fold and really sitting down and having a clear, concise, honest conversation about what the needs and what the concerns are of school communities. And I think to JD's point of making sure that we have teachers who are also educating other teachers, because they are in the similar seat of those educators, is so impactful. And I also want to kind of answer the question of how do we keep our content current as well. We do a plethora of data deep dumps, or what do I want to say? Deep dives, if you will. We do a plethora of those over the course of the entire school year. And we do pre and post surveys gauging our teacher interest, our student interest, growth mindset, collaborative problem solving skills, all of those things. And we really want to ensure that not only are we providing the need for experiential learning and design, but what are kids interested in, right? What are the things that they want to see themselves doing in the future? And I'm talking about the near future, like in high school, and preparing themselves for college and career readiness. So we take a look at the qualitative data as well as the quantitative data to inform our practice and make sure that we're keeping it current and keeping it relevant for all parties involved.
Excellent. So I was at a panel yesterday, and I'm not going to name the name, but there was a gentleman who made some interesting comments, and I was like, perfect grist for tomorrow's conversation. Because he made a salient point about how educators are overwhelmed. They have so much on their plate. I was talking to Stephanie before our panel about the number of students in the Cleveland area who had housing insecurity or food insecurity. Schools have often been seen as a catch-all of larger societal problems because students spend so much of their time there. The onus is on them to sort of solve these things, and when they don't, well, therefore they're failing. So my question, Stephanie, is for educators who want to understand how to incorporate this more in practice, but may have either a principal or a superintendent that may not be amenable to the idea, how do you broach that conversation to let them know that this is not just a flavor of the month, this is not just an add-on, but this is something that is an essential component of what they're trying to provide their young people?
Yeah, and I think we have to name what you just talked about, that what we're asking our educators to do right now, we're asking them to be teachers, we're asking them to be social workers, counselors, community liaisons. We're asking them to do a lot and not always providing the support that they need to do that. And that includes providing social workers and counselors in that school so that they have what they need to do their job. But we talk a lot about, first piece is, we need to build relationships first with those students. We need to know who they are first. We need to respect and value them before we can teach them anything. So we always start with relationships when we talk about that. But then also I think that there are a lot of, even if you don't necessarily have that district support, there are things that you can embed into your classroom, like project-based learning, like some of the career exploration resources that we have included as part of that playbook. To get you started, and I think then to tell the story to your district about the phenomenal things that are happening. So if you have a high-performing PLC and you're able to share with them the successes that you have by using some of these skill sets, then I think word travels fast that it's something that's making a difference in your classroom.
Excellent. Just a bit of housekeeping. I have a way to see the questions that come up on the app. Now, just full disclosure, I am technologically challenged, so I would prefer to call on people and pass around a mic. I do still have vinyl before it was cool to have vinyl. I still have a pager, Rolodex, 8-track. But if you do have questions, feel free. We'd like to make this as conversational as possible. So feel free to dive in. Otherwise, I will call on you if there are no questions that come forth. But just wanted to get that out there. Can you talk a little bit, too, about how to bring this, maybe, Stephanie, to our rural educators who may not see, when you talked about the playbook and the partnerships that can be gained by bringing in workforce agencies or companies, but what about for folks in rural areas where the district is 600 square miles and maybe there's not a critical mass of employers that are chomping at the bit to work with school districts? What would you say to our friends in rural areas?
Yeah, I think obviously the pandemic highlighted some of the challenges that our rural communities face, but I think we need to look at them more from an asset-based framework rather than what they don't have. So I'll use an example. I was just visiting with a school in Hawaii, and one of the educators there, she's a native Hawaiian, and a lot of her kids still live in tent communities, and there are lots of different, some of her students needed hotspots, some of them didn't need hotspots, some of them needed this and didn't need that, but she knew all of that because their community ties and their community outreach was so impactful that, she knew what everybody needed. When so-and-so didn't show up on Zoom, she could text mom and dad and make sure that they hopped on there. So she is an asset in that community, and we need to, find and leverage those assets because they can really help us bridge any gaps more quickly. But I also think that the other opportunity we saw during the pandemic was that, we can connect our rural communities, our urban and suburban communities with professionals all over the country and all over the world to make sure that they're exposed to careers and to opportunities that might not necessarily be available to them in their locality. So I think that's a common thing for rural and all of our school communities is to say, yeah, we want to have a strong connection to our local workforce, to our local industry, and to build those partnerships at the same time as we're engaging professionals all over the country so that our kids get a really robust viewpoint of what future possibilities are available to them.
Yeah.
I'd like
sure.
to build on
Jump
that
in.
if I may, because at NIFTY, we really live that out in practice in ways that were surprising to us, unexpected, but ultimately very powerful. I mentioned earlier that part of our model involves having people from corporations in the community come into our classrooms, typically physically into the classroom, in order to bolster the learning that takes place, as well as to provide our students with a window into the different careers and sectors and industries that exist out there that might not be in their communities. Our ability to deploy virtual volunteerism during COVID, understanding that in some communities, such as rural communities, as well as urban, frankly, there are still problems with broadband access and the like. But nonetheless, taking that into account, we were able to more than triple the number of corporate and community volunteers who were supporting our teachers and supporting our learners in the way that our model requires. And that proved to be enormously powerful. And not only that, we were able to do it across districts, across jurisdictions. For the first time ever, combine learners from different states to hear from the same executive at a corporation about how they went on their journey, or to hear from the same entrepreneur about how they embarked on their entrepreneurial journey. So for all of the devastation and hardship that COVID has wrought, it really has pushed us in some ways to embrace the deployment of virtual means to bolster learning in the classroom. And that's something that I think we should hold on to. I know at NIFTY, there's a strong call from the people who love our mission and love our kids to get back into the classroom, and we're going to facilitate that. But we're now going to do it alongside continued deployment of virtual teacher support, student support, and volunteerism, because we've seen how that allows us to do this at scale.
Excellent. Yeah. Building on that, Adrienne, what are your strategies for bringing in more community support for your program? So, for example, how do you identify potential workplace partners? I know that there are educators that are like, I'd love to create these opportunities, but I'm not sure what the first step is. Sometimes, they may have met resistance from employers who are like, well, what's in it for me? What's the return on my investment in this time? Or I don't know how to engage with middle school young people. Like, how do you incorporate that into your work and bring them involved?
Yeah, I'm so grateful for the team that we have, because I can't do it alone. There's actually a team of us that actually engage volunteerism. We have a lot of long-standing partners as well, Google, Goldman Sachs, ASA, that help us really to gauge where we can grab our volunteers from. But then we also have a vetting process. We don't just want folks that come in and it's like, hey, I'm a VP at Google. We want to know, are you willing to do the work with us? Do you see the gaps? Do you want to go back into the mind of a 6th grade student? And they're going to have a bunch of questions for you that may or may not have to do with your career, but just who you are as a human being. And how can I make it to where you are as a person? So we do a really good job at vetting both the personal and the professional. But as it pertains to who we engage with, we look at their mission, we look at their vision, we look at the trajectory of where their organizations are trying to go, and we really want to make sure that they are aligned with where we're trying to go. So I think that's a broad spectrum of like what we try to vet for and what we try to look for and listen to when we're talking about new engagement with volunteers and partnerships and corporately.
Excellent. Great. So Johnny, thank you for raising your hand. I do want to get to Beatrice Furnos. Thank you for the question. She asks, is the playbook accessible to us? If so, how do we access it? Stephanie?
It totally is. So you can go to amle.org. The amle.org/playbook will take you directly there. The entire playbook is free and accessible to you, and all of the resources included in it. We're seeing some schools do some really cool things with it. So we just had a challenge to have schools dig in and see how they could leverage the playbook in their own communities. One school is partnering with the National Park Service because they're near a national park, and they're going to do a program where they're educating kids about what it's like to work in conservation, to work in visitor services, so that they get exposed to that local industry. Another school is doing a school-wide enterprise, so every single student in the school has the opportunity to participate in their school-wide business, and they can pick different tracks that they're interested in: marketing, sales, all the things that go into running a business. So we're really excited to see how schools are using this playbook, and again, it's free to everybody.
Emphasis on the word free, so take advantage.
We like free.
Yes. So Johnny, I'm very proud that I can read your name tag from here, because at the age of 47, I'm like, I need reading glasses, and I'm kind of reluctant to get them because I'm like, hey, no, I don't want glasses yet. But you had a question. Fire away, please.
This idea of asset-based approaches. The story you told about the woman in Hawaii who's got like a finger on the pulse of everything and can really meet the needs that are there on the ground, I think is so important. But to think about how to think about how that type of engagement can be systemized.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an ideal.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if anyone's familiar with attempts to systemize that. And it sounds like the playbook is a step in that direction to like equip people with, the mindset and ideas. But in terms of actually like delineating, like, okay, we need a person to identify whether or not these communities have broadband. Because that's like a bottleneck. Because if you have broadband, it opens up all of the doors to getting in touch with CEOs and volunteers. But like the broadband, that's like a very major sticking point. So like identifying these major sticking points and then systematically laying out a framework where it's like, okay, these are the types of roles that need to exist. These are the types of questions, like specifically.
I can start.
Sure.
Yeah, so, and I'm nodding so vigorously because you're speaking our language. So we talk a lot in our best practice text for middle schools about the fact that every child should have an adult advocate in that school. And so there are lots of ways that at the school level, and I think you're talking also about the district level, but at the school level, we see a lot of middle schools engage in activities that help make sure that each of those students have that adult advocate. So we have one school that will put every student's picture around the gym and the wall, and then educators are encouraged to go up and write everything they know about that student that is not related to their academic record. So that ensures that if it quickly becomes evident, oh my gosh, this student might be falling through the cracks because we don't know a lot about them. Maybe they're not the highest or lowest achieving, they're just kind of in the middle, and we need to make sure that that student has an advocate and has a trusted adult. So I think that a lot of it is kind of more at that micro level at the school and making sure that there is that one trusted adult for each of our students so that we know when those needs arise.
Being as we are a community of educators here at this conference, speaking about an asset-based framework is preaching to the choir. But if I may build on the response, one of the things that I find so special about entrepreneurship education is that it truly is asset-based, because think of how any business starts. It starts with a passion and an idea of a learner. It starts with what he or she or they really care about, whether it's a personal passion they have, or a problem to be solved in their community, a situation that exists in their family, or a situation that exists out in the world that they want to find a response to. Entrepreneurship education as a curricular methodology is so incredibly empowering, as opposed to, traditional old school teacher-directed learning, or, many of the very important things, but really don't come from a place of inherent authenticity for the learner. So that's another way to think about an asset base. At NIFTY, we are unique among entrepreneurship education organizations in that we have always focused in our 35 years of existence on communities that we call underestimated, others would say underserved. But it's because we also bring an asset-based mentality into the communities we seek to approach that we are in those communities. And by the way, why is entrepreneurship education so important in those communities? Because they have smart people who are really talented and motivated, who simply lack the tools to be able to bring their ideas into reality. And their communities, they need enterprise. They need free enterprise, commerce, and business to help their own local and regional economies. So, you know, I think the common thread here is intent in how you approach, and a really imbuing all we do with that asset-based mentality, whether it's with respect to a student or a school or a community or a curriculum.
Outstanding. So if anybody else has a question, we have a microphone in front. Feel free to fire away. Like I said, I will call on people. Yes, in the back. Thank you.
Thank you all for being with us today and sharing. It's been very informative and helpful, and just appreciative to be in the space. I work for a social emotional learning company called Wayfinder, and we serve K-12. However, one of the most exciting things that we found and we've been able to use is we use our high school level curriculum to also support educators, and to, in those spaces where they're coming together to do professional development, we're also focusing on the social emotional wellness of the educator, and then also helping to build tools and skills on how they can continue to support their students, especially given everything that we've been navigating over the last couple of years. So I'm just wondering what your opinions or thoughts are on how social emotional wellness can layer with or align with some of the things that you've been talking about in the professional development spaces.
Excellent question.
I think SEL, one, it's a personal passion of mine, but then also it's a personal passion of the org in which I work with. I look at SEL work and the work that we do, not necessarily as a line, but interwoven. I think that everything that we do, from the decisions that we make on which curriculum we're going to move forward with, are we going to do only STEM, or are we going to incorporate STEAM? Every decision that we make has to have an analysis. Are we engaging socially, emotionally with our teachers, our educators, and our students? And I think that was to the point of the previous conversation that we had before, was how do we keep it relevant and how do we keep it current? We keep it current and we keep it relevant by incorporating SEL for not only the student and how they're going to be able to proceed through their project, but like, is the educator taking a step back? Are they struggling with their own growth mindset, right? Because if they can't meet students with a low growth mindset in and of themselves, how are they going to be able to mirror that for the students and persevere through the project and the 10-week intensive that we provide? So for me, it's all interwoven into the fabric of how we even develop our professional developments for educators.
Can I build on that?
Yeah.
What you said about the teacher's own mindset is so vitally important. And for us at NIFTY, you know, we were talking earlier about the things we've done to support our learners and educators to bolster the curriculum. But to be honest, I would say the single biggest need that our several thousand teachers across the nation and world expressed to us during the depths of COVID, and even still today, is needing emotional support through this time. I think of, and thank you so much for the question. Your question makes me think of a teacher here in Texas who's a NIFTY teacher, Marjorie Mitchell, who works with us in the Irving Independent School District. And she joked that she had one of our employees, Chris, who's a longtime NIFTY employee and just a really masterful guy who works so well with teachers and supports them. She jokes, you know, I had Chris on speed dial because she was calling him and Zooming him for one-on-ones, oftentimes not so much to ask technical questions about the curriculum, but just to talk about the trials and tribulations of doing this important work in an environment beset by all the challenges that COVID has brought on board. And so that for us was, it instantiated a major shift in how we redeployed our own team members across the nation to really make themselves available for for coffee hours, one-on-ones, virtually, in person too, as things began to open up, because that aspect of teacher support, honestly, the need has always been there, but we've realized it more acutely during COVID.
And I would just add, what we say is a dysregulated adult will never be able to regulate a child, right? So that social and emotional component has to be part of that professional development strategy. The wellness of the teachers and bringing joy back into the teaching profession, I think, really has to be a priority of our administrators when they're mapping out their professional growth plan.
Outstanding. We have a question here in the front.
Yeah, thank you. I run a youth film education and festival program that's running statewide in Louisiana and New Mexico. And since many of our teachers are not film or media professionals, what we've done with our virtual trainings is to include the students, their middle and high school students, and the teachers together in the workshops. And I'm wondering what you guys think about that model, or maybe some things for us to keep in mind when we're doing simultaneously training the trainers, the teachers and the students.
Yeah, it reminds me of whenever I don't know how to do something, I ask my 11-year-old, to explain it to me, on the phone or on a video game. So I think we're in this place where a lot of educators who have really extensive pedagogical training might not know the latest technology. So I think those opportunities for educators and students to learn together just empowers that student voice even more. It builds that relationship because they're accomplishing a task together. So I think it's a wonderful approach to that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the components of the work we do in Catalyst is that before the career professional, so that film expert, if you will, even comes into the classroom space, they actually have a call with the teacher, and they are tasked with giving the teacher what skills I can bring in, what I can contribute to the classroom. I don't want to just be a body in the classroom. I actually want to impart my skills and my expertise into these children's lives. And that call is extremely impactful because, one, it sets the groundwork for what educators want to see from their career professionals when they come in. But then also the career professional, again, is able to impart those skills like, hey, I saw that you said that you weren't too nifty at tech. Well, I actually have my bachelor's degree in this tech expertise, and I can actually bring that and break it down for students in a way that's understandable for them, so I can actually impart that skill into your classroom. So it goes further than teaching the student how to record or how to pan out, but it actually teaches those 21st century soft skills and those intangibles that we typically look past and look over. So I think it's essential to the work that we do to kind of bring together career professional skills as well as the teacher's expertise to make that magic happen in the classroom.
Your question and your work remind me of things that we tried at NIFTY during COVID that failed and things that succeeded. So one of the things that didn't work so well was when we tried to organize things for students utilizing the platforms that their district or school utilized, or our own learning management system, in our case, Canvas. What did work was utilizing the platforms that our students tend to use. So, Insta and TikTok. And I've learned a ton in the last 2 years about how you can really deliver some interesting lessons through Insta and TikTok. By the way, not Facebook. The students are not there. And we learned that by trying out different things and seeing where the learners showed up and really got engaged. And then we replicated that. And actually, we at NIFTY, like other organizations, we have a wonderful partnership with the AmeriCorps program, Public Allies, which brings emerging professionals into our organization to help us with different things. They've helped us a ton in our own organizational understanding of today's and tomorrow's platforms and how to utilize them to advance our mission and our work. Thank you so much for the question.
Thanks. Anybody else? Any takers? Well, one of the things that we discussed made me think about some of the challenges facing educators in general. We have some attrition, teachers that are leaving the profession. Some states are struggling more than others. And also, I think we have a challenge in helping our teacher corps reflect the populations that they're serving. And so I wonder from your perspective, like, because I would look at it, in my opinion, the idea of incorporating this into the classrooms might be a way to attract more people into the profession. Obviously, with COVID, we have burnout and other issues, but how can we, I guess, flip this and address some of these challenges in a positive way using the professional development that we're talking about to address, let's first start with to address the attrition, burnout. What's the best way to address that using the tools that we have?
Any takers? Thank you for that. Burnout is real. Our teachers are really going through the ringer. I think Stephanie brought up the point where they're not just educators, they're the nurses sometimes playing a parental role. And I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that teachers are sometimes struggling in that, and that it's truly valid. But also to that growth mindset point of like, okay, we've acknowledged it, let's not wallow in it, let's not stew in it, how do we navigate through it? And my team that I actually directly manage is program managers. Those are our hands-on teacher coaches who are meeting weekly with our educators who are enrolled in our program and meeting them not only for project trajectory and talk about the brainstorming of how your project can be manifested in your classroom, but just to meet them, to JD's point, of where are you as a human being? How was today? And what we have seen last year in our data deep dive is that from the time our educators started with us to the time that their time with us commenced, there was an 11% increase in teacher growth mindset and teacher advocacy. And that number and that percentage might seem very small, but in the year 2020, which we all know was absolutely like difficult beyond words, that 11% of teachers being able to identify, like, it was really rough, it was really tough, but I got through it. And I got through it by the support of the program manager, holding my hand through it, supporting me through it, challenging me through it. It's a very impactful number, and it's a number that I keep close to my heart. So I think with that being said, just having that support and that partnership that we were able to have with our educators meant a lot to them, and persevering throughout the day-to-day.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the professional development piece, but I think first when you talk about diversifying the workforce and exposing students to education as a career path, when we talked with students about what the median salary is for this role, I think we have to address the elephant in the room that we need to pay teachers what they're worth, right? So, yeah, thank you. Because no amount of professional development is going to keep someone in a job where they can't make a living wage. The second piece, though, is I think we've been thinking a lot about what the Gen Z workforce wants out of their jobs, and that the school structure is not really equipped to keep someone in a classroom for 30 years, right? Our Gen Z workforce wants diversity in what they're doing. They want to be able to learn and grow and to try new things. So how do we give them those opportunities and keep them in the classroom? So are there sabbaticals or things that we can do for them that help them become better teachers, but also keep them and retain them for longer in the classroom setting?
Yeah, that's amazing. It makes me think, too, of a gentleman yesterday I met who said that at the beginning of the school year, roughly 35% of his teachers were substitutes. Yeah. And I wonder if there's a way to allow substitutes to incorporate some of this and not to just kind of, hold the clipboard until the, teacher who belongs there kind of gets into the classroom, because the gentleman had said that many of those subs remain throughout the year. So is there a way to sort of bring that to the table to districts and say, look, you may have a shortage, but here's something that, again, will yield better outcomes, help all your students, help the people who are educating the students be more engaged. So in other words, is that an impediment, or can it be flipped to be an asset based on how we're preparing and engaging with teachers? What are your thoughts?
I'd say that's an interesting and provocative question when we just take a step back and consider the highly accelerated rates of teacher burnout and attrition because of COVID. I mean, we're going to have to, I personally don't think there are any magic bullets here. I think it's really quite complex and goes back to two things that we've circled around a bunch of times in this conversation, intent and communities of support, multiple communities of support. In order to do what you suggest, Kevin, I think it's an intriguing idea, and I think that we're going to have to think up new ways to replenish and sustain the teacher workforce, because as we all know, right now we're reaching things were not very good before, and they've only been exacerbated in terms of the turnover and attrition problem in the workforce. So we're definitely going to have to come up with new ideas and solutions.
Yeah, is it a case of, do you think, and Stephanie, something that you spoke about made me think of this, about the pedagogy and what people are learning in their graduate school programs. Is this something that we actually have to take back to teacher education before they actually get into the classroom? And then, we're talking to them and helping them with a playbook, with professional development. What might we be able to do on the front end before they even get to the classroom to incorporate some of these concepts? So maybe either on the undergraduate or graduate school level, is there room to engage with this?
Absolutely. I think we were part of a convening of organizations on the National Educator Shortage Summit, and one thing that I took away from that was that our teacher prep programs aren't always talking to our schools in terms of what we can be doing on this end to make sure that they're ready to succeed, and so that attrition isn't increased by students feeling overwhelmed or early career teachers feeling overwhelmed. And I had one district say, our kids keep coming out of the program, and kids, they're young adults, but they keep coming into our school as teachers writing lesson plans, and we haven't written lesson plans like that in 20 years. It's like, well, why didn't you call the local university and tell them, hey, we've got a partner to modernize how you're teaching this particular aspect of your program? So it illuminated for me that we need to really open up those lines of communications between our teacher prep programs and our schools. And I think some districts are doing that really well. They're even creating pipelines for paraprofessionals who have been really successful in their schools to do tuition partnerships so that those individuals can then become teachers. So there's some really exciting things happening. We just need to amplify those stories so that more districts have a roadmap to be able to do that themselves.
Your question has gotten me thinking, and I'm thinking about another potential pathway that it may be a new pathway, but one that's very much in the air right now as a way to replenish the teaching profession, and that is the new emphasis that's being augmented nationally for tutoring, and the support that's coming through the pipeline to help fund increased tutoring strategies. I haven't heard yet about any intentional effort to try to transform that into teacher pipelines, but it's really interesting to think about the possibilities that could be there, given the fact that this is an approach that our national education leadership is asking, up to the president, is asking the field to take on board as a way to address the many issues that are coming out of COVID.
Yeah. Do you think we've done enough from your perspective too, when you engage with organizations, community partners, businesses, do you think we've done enough to support the idea that it may not just be a one-off of somebody coming in from their career perspective, coming to an out-of-school time program or coming into the class for a one-off? And are there ways, I know for a while there's been pathways for people to come from the professional side to being educators, but is there more that we could be doing in that sense to create on-ramps and off-ramps? And so maybe you don't want a full career shift, you want to come in and educate for a couple of years and then go back to your job as a civil engineer and build bridges, or vice versa. Like, are there ways to do that would help address some of the challenges that we see?
Can I just jump on this? Because the answer is no, we have not done enough, and yes, we need to do more, and I'll tell you exactly why. And again, what I'm about to say is not new for the people that we're talking to in this audience. I've mentioned how Nifty brings corporate and community volunteers in the classroom. The worst thing we can ever do is to bring a person into the classroom once. the students understand when someone's there because they have to be there versus someone who really wants to be there and who cares. And the first thing that they will notice is whether that person they met comes back. Now, they can come back personally, they can come back virtually, but they've got to come back. And not just twice, but 3 and 4 times to really walk that journey with the student. In our case, around taking their idea for a business and figuring it out and putting it on paper as a business plan, and even for some of our learners, creating an actual and launching an actual business. In order to do that work, I mean, just think of all the steps on that trajectory. In order to have meaningful support for a learner, you have to come back again and again. Now take that up to the next level. What does that also mean? It means if you're an organization like us that works with corporations to help bolster your model, and the corporations we work with, you know, EY, Santander, Goldman as well, SAP, many more, Citi, they're great. They want to deploy their employees in helpful ways. But we are also obliged to say, all right, if you're going to walk with us, you've got to walk with us all the way. And that means not just architecting a volunteer scheme that takes a learner and a volunteer through the whole school year, but working with that company to say, like, what's our real intentional multi-year plan? And what moments are we taking to learn about how it's gone and what we're going to address? One of the things that we've had to address at NIFTY and pay much more attention to is all that's come up around this moment of reckoning around social and racial justice, and the difference between the lived experiences of some of our corporate volunteers and the lived experiences of our learners, and how that finds its way into the classroom, sometimes in not so healthy ways. So we absolutely can and should do more. And the good news is, again, back to this idea of intent, when you're intentional about it, you can actually make a lasting difference with learners.
I think that intent is important because, yeah, there's such a pool of expertise we can draw on, but just being good at something doesn't make you good at teaching that something, right? So we need to make sure that that pedagogical background is tied to that expertise that we want to bring our students. So.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, did you have a
I
question?
second everything that they said. Everything.
John, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, well, I think that the point about consistency is very, very important. But I also I wonder to what extent in education we let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Insofar as leveraging crowdsourcing and technology that we have now that we didn't have a decade or 2 decades ago. Because I think that ideally, a chemistry teacher will be there and be the chemistry teacher for the whole year. But we've also got situations in rural areas in Texas where they've got the bus driver just sitting in because it's a warm body. And in that situation, if the alternative was like, hey, here's a UT student who's only going to be with you for like 3 days, but they're a chemistry major and they know what they're talking about, and they've received a critical mass of training such that they can manage classroom well, and then there's some sort of infrastructure that allows them to hand off the students that they're working with to the next person. And, we live in an age of crowdsourcing, and I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts about that. I agree 100% that ideally there would be consistency, but again, I always return to this idea of not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like, can we utilize crowdsourcing, all of the people who are passionate about education to add value to the space and accept some trade-offs? I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts on that.
I know it's interwoven into our program that we're not only getting the corporate partners, but we're also pulling from those groups of students. We're pulling from those groups of HVAC professionals in the community, right? Because we understand and realize that community is everything. And when we're talking about the school, we need to make sure that we're bringing in the community into school and student experience. So to your point with, I guess my point is we try to pull in as many community partners and caring adults to not only teach the content, but also to teach students how to be great human beings. And you might have a person from the University of Texas who is a student who may not be professionally have the years under their belt, but they do have skills of how to navigate a classroom, how to advocate and self-advocate for yourself when it comes to your teacher or any professional in the space. And those are valuable tools and valuable skills that we want to impart as well in our students. So we pull from all those different places, and they are also very consistent. We actually make it mandatory that our volunteers volunteer 4 to 6 times in a classroom setting. And then from there, they actually continue their partnership for over 3 years in that particular classroom. So that builds consistency, but it also builds rapport with the teacher and the volunteer, as well as the teacher and the student. So those are kind of some of the strides that we're trying to make.
I'm struggling a little bit with your question because I'm thinking about what in developmentally delicate and important time, especially the middle grades years are, and how sometimes that relationship is even more important than the content necessarily that's being taught, because they're, shaping as who they're going to become as adults. So I don't want the long-term vision to be how do we plug these gaps, but I get what you're saying, that sometimes the bus driver isn't going to have any better knowledge of what's going on developmentally with these kids than the UT student is. So I understand where you're coming from. I'm struggling with how do we make sure that we're providing those types of relationships that we know are fundamental for educating young adolescents.
Yeah.
I think the key is to build trust, right? So trust is built over time. Like when, as JD mentioned, like when the people return, the student understands, yeah, this person is invested. This person cares about me and my future and my understanding of what's going on. I trust that. I know that they're going to be there and I'm invested. I don't know how much you can build up trust over 3 days. You can bring your authentic self, so that's an important component as well. So I would say trust and authenticity, obviously leaning more towards trust than but both are very important components, and bringing those to the table, I think, is what makes the difference.
Sorry,
Sure. We got a couple minutes, so go ahead.
Sure, yeah. So I guess I totally, and what I'm I guess alluding to is not a sense that that it's the ideal situation, but that, like, let me clarify. I think that trust and consistency is fundamental, but I also question whether or not a person who establishes that trust and consistency needs to be an expert in chemistry, needs to be an expert in math.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this could be a community member,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Who, like when the students get that source of trust and consistency, it's not from the person who's teaching them chemistry or math. It's from a person who's in the community, maybe a mother or a father or something, or a trained social worker who has no understanding or training of how to teach chemistry or algebra, but understands the social emotional learning
Right.
aspect, and
Right.
that's their wheelhouse. And that is the person, because they live in that community, they can commit for more than X number of sessions. Like that becomes their role. So to like very clearly delineate, like, is this person here, is the value they add subject matter expertise, or is the value they add that social emotional consistency? And to like tease that out, I think there's a lot of potential in that.
Yeah.
I wonder if there are, like, I don't know, at this point I'm just talking about.
No, I think we hear you, and the way I think about it is, again, being intentional about how you deploy different people in different capacity for different roles and opportunities in your model. Sometimes there might be a short-term thing, like for us, one of these bigger convenings where we bring a CEO or an entrepreneur in to talk to hundreds of students across a number of districts. That might be a lighter touch, one-off type of thing. I would argue when it comes to the more detailed yeoman's work of helping a student develop a kernel of an idea into a business plan, an actual business, you do want someone who's going to make the commitment and have the subject matter expertise. So to your point, knowing where to delineate and where to assign people based on the capacity they can give and the expertise they do have is a way to go about your question.
Well, that's a fabulous way to wrap up. We have about 20 seconds. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being part of this conversation. Adrienne, JD, Stephanie, valuable insights. We appreciated it very much. We'll be up here to talk with folks again, but thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.